Says, hey babe, take a walk on the wild side. Said, hey.
Regarding Lulu.
Hello and welcome to the first episode of Regarding Lulu, a track-by-track dissection of the album Lulu, released by Lou Reed and Metallica as a collaborative effort back on October 31st, 2011. When this album first came out, it was widely panned by fans and critics alike. However, creative geniuses like David Bowie are on record as saying that this work would go down as Lou Reed's masterpiece and a masterwork for Metallica as well. Who was right? Join us as we find out. I'm Chaz Charles. Joining me is my co-host, Greg Wolf. Greg, say hello.
Thanks very much, Chaz, for having me on the podcast. Very excited to talk about Lulu and Lou Reed and Metallica and all that other good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, Greg, we're going to sit and dissect this track by track. But as we know, you and I know, but let's, for the sake of our listeners, give them some context and some background. So this work was inspired by a play that was written a long time ago by a gentleman, a German playwright, Benjamin Franklin Wedekind, or Frank Wedekind as he went professionally. This play came out, what was it? Let's see. Came out as a series of two plays called Earth Spirit and Pandora's Box. Earth Spirit was the first work released in 1895. And was followed up by a second play called Pandora's Box in 1904. And together, the two of them were packaged up and looks like released, or not released, because they didn't really do that back then, did they? But jointly considered a full body of work called Lulu, or the Lulu Plays. So looks like they weren't actually, so they were released, but it doesn't look like they were actually produced until.
They were not staged at that time?
Not staged until the 20s, it would appear.
The production was not mounted.
Let's see. Yeah, you think we would want to know this. The play was adapted for film twice in the 20s. Okay, so the plays were actually produced earlier. Yeah, and see, this is the thing, Greg. Right? This is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
We're gonna learn and grow in our knowledge of this as we go along. Because here's the deal: you come at this as being somebody who's got some background with Frank Wedekind, and we'll go over that. And I come at this from being just a fan of Metallica. And so I think what we want to do is give folks.
And don't forget, Chaz, also I am a fan of Lou Reed.
And exactly, that's where I was going to go. In terms of the music and what brought us together on this as an original concept or a project, is that you're more of a Lou Reed fan than I am, and I'm certainly more of a Metallica fan than you are. And given that this work was so controversial and that we wanted to kind of take it from the aspect of just being a couple of guys who don't know much other than putting a CD in when we used to have those things and listen to them, we wanted to kind of come at this from the place of being music fans and try and see, is this, work something that was really ahead of its time when it was released. From a music standpoint, or was all the criticism justified and it still deserves its place in the dustbin of history?
And we have not listened to this work yet, so we're coming to it completely fresh.
And that is our angle. You are coming to it completely fresh. I listened to it, I think, a grand total of 1.5 times when it was released in 2011, and I got to be honest, I don't own the CD anymore. I haven't listened to it since. This was very much inspired by my friends over at the podcast Will Rock, Corey and Mark, who do a track-by-track dissection of the Van Halen catalog. They basically inspired this journey here on this piece of music for the simple reason that we just want to kind of come at this from the idea that we're fans of the music And it's a journey of discovery. It's a work that you haven't heard. It was Lou Reed's last recorded work before he died. And I heard it, like I said, 1.5 times, but really haven't listened to it since, and really wrote it off when it came out, like so many other people. But in the course of discovery, lately, very recently, I should say, I saw where David Bowie had made a comment to Lou Reed's widow, and I think you know her name.
Laurie Anderson, the famous musician Laurie Anderson, right?
Yeah, so Lou's widow, after the time of his death, well, yeah, I guess she would be a widow, of course, after he died. But anyway, David Bowie made the comment to her that this work, Lulu, was probably going to be regarded as Lou's masterpiece. And he basically said the same thing for Metallica as well, which was contrary to almost all of the professional critics, all the fans when this was released. So I've got a very high regard for David Bowie. I would imagine you do too.
Certainly.
We haven't really discussed Bowie.
One of the greatest of all time, certainly.
Right, exactly. So if he's seeing it that way, I think it deserves to be revisited. So in the interest of fairness, we're going back and we're going to revisit this. So
you know what, Chaz? You and I are nothing if not fair. Can I say that?
We try.
We try.
And
we want to talk a little bit about Chaz. I don't want to jump the gun, but about Frank Wedekin's some of his other known works that maybe some of our listeners will be familiar with.
Well, and that's a
Lulu.
Great point, Wolfie. We want to get into that because really that was where you and I were just kind of catching up over the phone one day as friends and kind of just started talking about various things. When I brought up this concept, you immediately knew who Frank Wedekin was. So why don't you tell our listeners why that is? How do you know Frank Wedekin?
Well, and I think our listeners will maybe be more familiar with this other work of his, which is Spring Awakening. And Spring Awakening had a quite a successful run on Broadway, and the two of the stars of Spring Awakening were Leah Michele and Jonathan Groff, who, at least to those who are familiar with some of the happenings on Broadway, are two major stars, and also people would be familiar with Leah Michele for her starring role in the TV show Glee, about the high school Glee club. And so that show was also written by Frank Wedekind, and I think, as I said, was successful and probably more well known to our listeners than this work that we're talking about today, or at least inspired by this work by Frank Wedekind, the Lulu plays.
Exactly. And see, this is where this is great because I was not familiar with him at all. Got to be honest, before we even talked about the concept of doing this podcast, I hadn't read the Lulu plays. I basically, like I said, gave the album one listen and tossed it. Understanding, that there had been some inspiration somewhere, but not being a very big Lou Reed fan, beyond, I would say.
Take a walk on the wild side?
Beyond taking, right. Give me your Statue of Liberty, give me you're tired, you're poor, and you're hungry, and I'll piss on them. I mean, other than that, I was really not a big fan of Lou Reed or quoting him. So there were basically 2 or 3 songs. Not a big fan of the Velvet Underground and not really into that scene at all. I'm a metalhead from way back, so I'm a Metallica.
But you are an Andy Warhol fan, right? And well, in that group, in the Andy Warhol scene, hanging out. Velvet Underground being a band produced by Andy Warhol, and I know you appreciate his art.
Yeah, but you and I are both kind of natives of the Northeast there, and being a part of the New York creative scene back in the 90s, you couldn't really be in that scene with any credibility and slag either Lou Reed or Andy Warhol. So no, I mean, I've never been active detractors of each, but, honestly, not big fans. But I'm a Metallica, a member of the Club Alcoholica from way back when I was a kid. Saw Metallica on, I think the first time I saw them was on the Master of Puppets tour when they were the first leg, when they were still in the theaters. So Capitol Theater, in where is that, Passaic, New Jersey, or somewhere there in New Jersey. Saw them in this old theater with Metal Church, and have been a big Metallica fan in predating a couple of those albums. I had a radio show in high school, used to play everything from Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, and Justice for All, and up and up and up. But then, like everything else, we grow and we kind of move away from things. And I kind of, moved away from Metallica, I guess, as far as you could in the 90s and the 2000s, although they were on the radio everywhere. The Black Album was certainly huge. Did go to see them on the stadium tour with Guns N' Roses, where they blew Guns N' Roses off the stage. But beyond that, didn't really ever have a connection to Lou Reed like I do with Metallica. So when this album came out, it was intriguing. And I was certainly there on the day. We used to do this, right? Back in the day, we would anticipate records coming out and go to the store and buy them and be among the first. And now it's like I get the notification and it's just automatically there in Spotify, right? But I was really excited when it came out, and I thought it was really interesting. And at that point was more of a, we are both musicians. I guess we should give our readers that context as well. You're a bass player and a guitarist and a vocalist, and I play guitar, play some drums, and have for all these years, and certainly back at that time.
We are two gigging musicians.
That's it. We're out there. We're playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll tell people later where they can get where they can find us on Twitter or Facebook or wherever we are, Instagram. I don't know of all the various things that you've got, but we can certainly promote that later. But yeah, so I was much more. I think at the time when this came out, again, this is like the early aughts, or in 2011. My creative palette had expanded, my musical tastes had expanded, and I was excited to hear what could Metallica possibly do with Lou Reed. And when I got it, I listened to it and was just like, what is this? And it was just not my bag, baby. So
I don't know, Chaz, if you've had this experience of listening to music, and we've both been listening to music for our whole lives practically, I think, and paying a lot of attention, I think, too, and as we got older, especially. But the experience I've often had is that when I play an album for the first time, sometimes I find that the ones that are the ones that stick with me, and the ones that have lasting staying power with me to keep my attention and to have me coming back again and again, are ones that maybe the first few listens I'm not totally there yet. I'm not completely drawn in or captivated, and it takes me a little bit more work. I got to put a little more work into it before I get that that joy and excitement back out of the album. So the ones that are the most pleasing on the first listen sort of have a short shelf life, and a little bit too sweet. It's a quick burst of pleasure, and then you know what? You listen to it a few more times. I've had enough of this.
Yeah.
There's not as much substance in it, not as much depth.
Right. Yeah, they're more nostalgic, or more of what you're familiar with or used to, and they just become very easy to consume. But yeah, particularly with big acts like that, right, that have a legacy, that have really deep catalogs, and especially if you're a fan, right, their newer works tend to be something that, you think, oh yeah, this is, them kind of rehashing where they've been. It's very rare that artists that established in their careers will go out on a limb. And when they do, you're right. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Some of the works, I can think of some of my favorite bands of the genre, just in hair metal. I think we've talked a lot about my favorite band, Def Leppard, over the years. But if we talk about Def Leppard, that's one band where they just kind of revisit past glories again and again and again. Can't really say they're innovating or challenging or doing anything new. And
pour some sugar on me, right?
Right, yeah. Pour some sugar on this with Shania Twain. She does that song too in her own way, because she married Mutt Lange. But we won't go there. I digress.
But certainly someone like Lou Reed, and you already pointed out, having some history with the Velvet Underground, with Andy Warhol, and that whole art factory scene back in the day. Lou is certainly an artist of substance, and is a creative force, and Even though we had some pop success, this is a pretty heavy duty guy in terms of his artistic sensibilities, I think.
Exactly. So to come together with a band like Metallica, who by that point, they started out in the underground, and gained their popularity without radio airplay. It was all trading basement tapes and bootlegs among fans, right? Through the mail, across the seas, in the metal scene, and then here in the U.S. It's a band from California, but we'd certainly heard about them in the metal scene back in New York through that same network of tape traders and fanzines and, all those things back in the day. And so this is a band that kind of started out, underground metal, broke through commercially and was massively successful with people, producers like Bob Rock. When the Black album came and, multi-million, multi-platinum success followed. And so, to see the two of those working together, it was really when this whole concept was announced. Again, I was one of those guys that was the first in line by that point. I was like, okay, I really want to hear what they're doing. Going with somebody as hardcore as Lou Reed, who is just so abstract at times. Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, some of his earlier works to me were just inaccessible audibly. I just could not listen to them. I wanted to hear what could they do, and it's really interesting when you go and look at the descriptions out on the internet, and you look at what Lou Reed and Metallica themselves had to say about the collaboration. Lou Reed was quoted as saying, "Why is this surprising to anybody?" He said, "It's an odd collaboration would be Metallica and Cher. That would be odd. Us, this is an obvious collaboration." It's like, okay, whatever you're smoking, it's obvious, dude, but it wasn't to me. So I was excited and wanted to hear it. And again, when I did, to your point, right, I don't think at that time I was a mature enough musician to give it more than a couple of listens before making a decision and putting it away. And again, I did not listen to the whole thing twice. It was about 1.5 times. Gave it a second listen after that first listen, and it's just like, no.
And at that time, I take it, Chaz, you did not go back to the source material to Wedekind and read the Lulu plays in preparation for listening to this masterwork by Lou Reed and Metallica. Is that correct?
Exactly. Did not do that, Greg, and that's
but
what we
did do here. That this time. Correct,
that's
Chaz?
right.
We should probably share with our listeners that we have, in fact, digested the Frank Wedekind's source material that inspired Lou Reed and Metallica to make this album, the Lulu plays, and they're I don't know. I think we both had a pretty strong reaction to that, to the work and to reading the play, which is a play. It's written in it's a dialogue between these characters and in these two parts that you mentioned earlier. And I think we both had a pretty strong reaction. It's about the central character named Lulu, who's a young woman at the beginning of the plays anyway. Yeah. And I don't know, any thoughts on the source material that you wanted to bring up before we play the first track?
Yeah, the source material to me, quite frankly, was at first disturbing. As we kind of got into it, I kind of understood what it was
about. And intentionally
so,
right? I think Wedekind is a provocateur, and all his writing has a very strong sort of sexual element to it, and theme, as Spring Awakening, absolutely, as the title suggests. And for listeners who had seen that show, certainly has a very strong, it's an awakening and a sexual awakening by these young people in the story, and so Wedekind is definitely a writer of that genre, and I think that you experience that in your reading of the play.
Yeah. And what we learned, what I learned by going to Wikipedia and trying to understand this individual a little bit more as we were kind of researching the source material is, as you said, his play, provocative at the time and even still through to this day. He is basically, I guess, considered one of the forefathers of expressionism in epic theater. or in terms of developing the epic theater. And again, I'm not really a theater guy. I come at this as being a metalhead. So for me, it was all new to kind of take this in and understand what his influence was, but it was significant. And as you've said, the play Spring Awakening about sexuality and puberty created a lot of scandal back in the day, contained scenes of homoeroticism, implied male masturbation, actual male masturbation, sadomasochism between a teenage boy and a girl, rape and suicide, as well as references to abortion. This was not last week, folks. This was 1891. So, when you talk about the guy pushing the envelope, and like even what we think about with artists today and how some works are immediately criticized, as they're announced or when they're coming out because of their themes, it's interesting to note that the more things change, the more they stay the same. Things have really not been different in the creative world at all over the last 100 some odd years. People are always pushing the envelope, and they continue to this day, because it's really all about pushing social norms, right? And pushing on societal norms. And I guess that's what he was really known for, was criticizing bourgeois attitudes towards sex in his day.
Yeah, fascinating. So are we getting close to the point when we're going to listen the unveiling, the big reveal of the first track? Or
I think we want to get there, yes. So the big reveal on this track is going to be that it's again kind of based on Lulu. And I think, Greg, is an interesting exploration of this. What we can kind of do is step into this as we both kind of stepped into the play, right? So trying to understand what we're dealing with here. So as the whole play concept, as the whole thing begins, let's just go over really quickly what we see as the plot. And I'm taking the plot directly from what we found on Wikipedia, so our listeners don't need to do that for themselves. But essentially, here it is in the nutshell, folks. The setup. In the prologue, the characters in this drama are introduced by an animal tamer as if they're creatures in a traveling circus. Lulu herself is described as the true animal, the wild, beautiful animal, and the primal form of a woman. And that was actually really interesting as the play started kind of comes in. You see what would, I think today very, clearly be called misogynistic attitudes toward this woman in a cage who's being stroked and kind of, put on display. And I think at a certain point even picked up, and he's touching her or fondling her, right? Or at least that's what's being described in the first few stanzas. And to me, I was just, wow, kind of blown away at what we were seeing, and just that whole context of this thing was, written back in the 1890s. But, from there, it kind of gives us the theme of where it goes. And essentially, it's her story of, her entry into, I guess, what's described as the sexual underworld of Germany at that time. With that, this is the setup for what we're getting into with the work by Lou Reed and Metallica. So do you think there's any more background we want to go into, Greg, before we roll this first track? Essentially, she gets into this world. She is, of course, taken in by a number of different men. And there's the caveat that she ends up murdering, I think, most of the men that come into her life. And at a certain point, she ends up on the tip of a blade herself. And that's kind of how the whole story resolves.
Yeah, and she seems to be this very, very alluring, very beautiful young woman that is irresistible, I think, to these men and young men and older men, but ends up with several different husbands and as you say, a lot of murder involved, a lot of intrigue, and she sort of seems like the men that she gets involved with sort of know that she will destroy their lives. She will ruin them, but they can't resist anyway.
They cannot resist. That is it. And I think that's it.
And so it repeats over, as you said, over and over through the play, and then at the end, her ultimate destruction at the end of the play as well. But no, I think that's a good setup to get us into the first track, which I'm at the edge of my seat here.
Here we are.
Anticipation. hopefully our listeners are also at the edge of their seat with anticipation at hearing this work, and we'll see, if we we side with David Bowie, or we side with some of the more mainstream music critics, and even Chaz himself, whose initial review. What was your review of the album in a nutshell? Not favorable.
I think I said biggest piece of shit ever committed to the musical lexicon. Yeah. So that was my completely fan-based, Metallica fan-based opinion. And quite frankly, haven't heard it since. So I can't even, truthfully recall why did I think that, other than what I can, vaguely remember in my mind. So with that, we're going to dive right in, because I think this is going to be really cool. You've never heard this. And so, again, I think the element of surprise is here for us and our listeners. And so without further ado, let's dive in. There are, and just to one more piece of context for our listeners, there are 10 tracks on this album. So you're looking at a podcast that maybe has 10 or 11 episodes. We got a very limited shelf life here. We're just going through this thing track by track, and we'll get to the end and say, okay, as a whole body of work, where did we land? We're going to judge each individual track, and then as it's all totaled at the end, as a complete body of work. So with that, we will get into track 1 off of Lulu by Metallica and Lou Reed. This is called Brandenburg Gate. Here we go.
I would cut my legs and tits off when I think of Boris Karloff and Kinski in the dark of the moon. You made me dream of Nosferatu, trapped on the Isle of Dr. Moreau. Oh, wouldn't it be lovely?
Okay, right out of the box. What the hell is this?
Did they put the wrong album in my jack in the sleeve here? What's going on?
Okay, so much to digest there. My God, the references alone. Okay, so where's he going? He's going Boris Karloff, Kinski, Nosferatu, Dr. Moreau. Wouldn't it be lovely? What the hell is this man talking about, Greg? We've read the plays right out of the box. Where's Lou coming from?
Any idea, Chaz? I mean, I got to hear more, I think, before I can make too much of a. But yes, he's. I think he's obviously shocking us right from the get-go. He wants to be. Provocative, as his inspiration, Frank Whittekind, always would be provocative. So Lou is very much in that same mode, I think, of right out of the gate.
I would cut my legs and tits off.
Not pulling any punches right out of the gate. So, and in a very Lou Reed style, sort of a talk sing style that Lou is known for. Yeah. Interesting that musically all we're hearing is an acoustic guitar right now.
Yeah, I was going to say the finger styling isn't exactly. I mean, that's doesn't even sound like what I would expect from Lou Reed.
No, because Lou Lou is an electric guitar player primarily with a little distortion, and he likes to play the electric a lot. Yeah. So it's an interesting opening, but certainly vocally it is classic Lou Reed.
It hurts my ears. I would imagine like it hurt the ears of those at the at the folk festival when Bob Dylan picked up an electric guitar. I'm hearing Lou Reed. Lou Reed, like you just said, Lou Reed in my mind is distorted electric, very abstract. Other than those couple of pop hits. And I hear this and go, oh my God, that's not what I expected at all. And, I'm sorry, where's Metallica? I want to know who's playing that guitar.
I would say, Chaz, that lyrically, To me anyway, my initial reaction is that it's not out of character for the way
Lou.
Lou writes. I mean, he writes abstract. He has a lot of references, and he's always being provocative. He's being poetic. It's that's the way he approaches songs. So that part of it does not. I don't find jarring in any way. I think it's very in keeping with what Lou does. So, but the guitar, I think, is a little, I mean, nothing wrong with it. And I think, him coming in with the acoustic as the, the very first part of the recording and of the whole album, the beginning of the first track, is sometimes that can be a way to ease people in a little bit. We don't come in strong with the full band at full level. We have a little bit of an opening. We have a prelude, which is a little bit to sort of bring the listener in a little bit before we hit them over the head. Musically, sonically.
Yeah, and it should be noted too that really he was the driver of this. Metallica very much considered themselves his band for the project, but this is all Lou. So this is Lou driving it. So not influenced by what we know to be James Hetfield of Metallica, his lyrical bent. This was all Lou, and they were a hired band. Or collaborator.
Sort of like Bob Dylan and the band, right?
Yeah, exactly. This was very much that collaborative effort of them. From what I've read, Lars Ulrich is the drummer of Metallica, kind of quoted as Lou had this body of work and wanted them to punch it up. And so that's where they do that at some point. I do know there's metal coming on this album, and I think it's what I can see in the sound signature coming next. So let's take a listen.
Well timed.
Yeah. Oh, there's James.
Things got pretty gory as I crossed to the Brandenburg Gate. I was feeling snappy, perhaps I've been napping and I just ate. I was with Hawk and tear you apart on a midnight shift. A graveyard romance can only give one chance as the tombstone trees freeze. Small town girl.
Okay. I was thinking Peter Lorre when things got pretty gory as I crossed to the Brandenburg Gate. So we're clearly set in Berlin, which is where the play starts for sure. Right. And I think as we know in the play, I'm just going to kind of go back to the source material, right? Opens up with her being already in the company of a couple of men. I think Dr. Gohl, which was, I think, her first husband, if I'm not wrong.
That's right. Yep. Her first
husband. Dr. Gohl. Then there's a couple other people that perhaps as people, if they want to know the source material, this Dr. Schoen, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, it's got the two, like the Motley Crue, the two dots over the O and the two dots over the U. What's that called?
Is that the umlaut?
There you go. You're much smarter than I am, so I'll take your word for it. You sounded very authoritative with that.
I'm not positive about that, but okay. maybe.
So Dr. Schoen.
Yep.
He's a newspaper owner and an editor, and I think he is really her chief. These days, I think we would call him pimp, but sponsor, if you will.
Benefactor, maybe.
What's that?
Benefactor, if I can use that term.
Yeah, if we can use that term as the good doctor in My Fair Lady, right? The noble character played by Rex Harrison in that production, right? And that's really, I wanted to mention as I was reading this, it was one of the things that kind of struck me is that it really did seem like the setup in the play was that they took this kind of ragamuffin off the streets, dusted her off. And the way it was setting up in the play, it did seem like it was more of a, I would say, a benefactor type situation. But it very quickly devolves into, oh no, this Dr. Goal has got some stuff going on behind the green door, if you know what I'm implying. And that kind of sets the mood pretty early on for what she is involved with and where she is. But as we learn later in the play, she was taken off the streets at a young age, by 14 or 15, as the play goes, by this Dr. Schoen, put into the clutches of this Dr. Goal. And there are a bunch of other characters that we'll meet as we'll go along. Alva, the doctor's son, who becomes pretty central to her life through both part 1 and part 2. But here, what Lou is talking about, Peter Lorre, and even some of the other references, I mean, I got to look back, but I'm thinking he's contemporized this because I don't think these folks were around and doing their thing when the source material was created. So I think we're already kind of moving forward in time with what Lou has put forward. And I'm seeing really this is more of an inspiration, not a direct interpretation.
Yeah, so far it seems definitely to be much more of just, and I'm not, besides some of, what we already touched on with just in broad terms, being provocative and different things like that. I'm not hearing any specific connections to the source material yet.
No, but I am hearing something that would imply murderous horror types of things, right?
Yes,
so
and it may be that loose. Yeah, it may be just, sort of thematically, some of these themes that Whittakin touches on in the Lulu plays that inspired Lou. And so we'll see. I guess we will learn, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, already we got a couple of classic vampire references. So we got an actor, and a character, both in the vampire genre. And now we've got Peter Lorre. I don't know if he played a vampire at any point, but certainly he played horror characters over his career. So we've got all these references already to horror and gore. Small Town Girl being refrained over and over and over by James Hetfield, kind of talking about who this character is in the background.
Yeah. Well, maybe do you think they are referencing sort of a Lulu type character as the Small Town Girl?
I think Lulu is being referred to as, she's the Small Town Girl, and I'm not sure yet if she is the horror of these characters or if these are the characters that she's falling in with. You know what I mean? So yes. I think that'll kind of reveal itself as it did in the play very early. We see immediately a young, attractive, naive girl in the clutches of these men. And I think as she, sophisticates over the course of the play and becomes the aggressor, if you will, or more than manipulator. I wonder if we're going to see that here. So what we're seeing is, we keep hearing James, small town girl, small town girl. The next line in this is, I was feeling snappy. Perhaps I'd been napping and I had just ate. Small town girl, bow! A following heart can tear you apart on a midnight to 8 shift. A graveyard romance can only give one chance as the tombstones weave and breathe. Wow.
Lou is deep. Can I ask you a question, Chaz?
Yeah.
What was as a Metallica fan, what was your response to the music that the band is playing behind these Lou Reed lyrics in this first minute or so of some metal from the boys?
Well, it was immediately familiar. I think I think at this time, put it this way, when I first heard James singing Small Town Girl over and over and over again in the background, I was like, oh my God, are you putting James Hetfield in the role of a small town girl? Is this a self-proclamation? What the hell is this? No, I wasn't having it. But the music itself, it's pretty pedestrian. It was kind of slow for Metallica, but that's where they were at the time, and it's very much representative of that sound. So this was all very familiar with the very commercially successful Metallica by this point.
But nothing too interesting to you about
Not at all. No. In fact, it was, like I said, too slow. It was, a little bit,
just
there's a little bit
ordinary,
melodic in
nothing
there. Yeah.
special.
Yeah. Was not impressed at all. No. And, quite frankly, didn't start me off on a good note. So let's see where it goes from here.
Feeling happy when my heart got beating on a Sunday afternoon. I send our breezes going through the pieces and stars with silver.
All right, I love that. I love that. So, Lou, I dreamt of breezes going through the treeses. I mean, Lou is Dr. Seuss. That's something I would totally expect from Lou Reed. That was great.
I have the hearts that I keep apart, trying to relate the normal feelings as the nighttime feeling. Sun at this, dark so late. My small brown girl.
Okay, so yeah, he sounds drunk. So they're talking about absinthe here. I think back in 2011, I was aware of absinthe because I think I had read a story somewhere that Marilyn Manson had smuggled some into the country and had been drinking some, and so apparently very psychedelic, right? Very, yeah,
very powerful,
right?
Drug, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm already
dangerous, I believe, as well.
Right, exactly. Like for long-term mental health, right? Well,
and even death, right? I think it can be very, tricky stuff. So
yeah, so we're hearing an element of some poison kind of being introduced to this, right? Some, gosh, I mean, feeling happy when my heart got beating on a Sunday afternoon. So is it that this small town girl is now in the big city? And, I mean, because again, kind of going back to the song is called Brandenburg Gate. Is this a small town girl arriving in Berlin with big town dreams? Right.
That certainly would make sense, right?
Yeah.
By the name and all of that. And we know that if he's looking to the play, as you said earlier, and Lulu is in Germany and in Berlin, that maybe that would be a good opening and get our main character, our heroine, onto the scene, right, to bring her into position for what happens next. So maybe that's what Lou's doing. One thing I would say musically, you had commented a bit about the Metallica and what you were hearing. To me, I'm a big fan of Lou's style of singing and talk singing that he does with his band, where Lou is playing his guitar, which is in much more of a rock style, and he has a nice, usually a sort of a supple R&B sort of bass and drum groove behind him, usually a very spare arrangement, and he his vocals, I find, really works well for him in what he does musically, where he has that type of a sound and those more bluesy R&B, rock, soul influences, and it's very effective. I don't find it terribly effective with what he's doing vocally on top of the Metallica music. It seems like it really, to me, is not pleasing. It's not compelling. It doesn't seem to work well for me. His arrangements are very spare usually, and his vocal is very much out front, I find, in his music, and it's more like and the music really supports it in an effective, really effective way, powerful way that I find the Metallica music diminishes what he's saying, I find.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you said. I mean, to me, it sounds forced. It sounds like this is a mashup. It sounds like maybe, it's supposed to be, what do they call that? the spoken word, all those mashup kind of situations where it's just, this combination. I'm losing some of those vocals because Metallica is so powerful. I'm kind of distracted by James Hetfield, again, kind of repeating that in the background. I'm not really connecting the two at this point now. It's kind of getting lost for me, right? I'm kind of like, okay, sonically, where is this going? As you said, not pleasing to the ears at all. To me, quite frankly, I think when it came out, my closest comparison was Two Virgins by John Lennon and Yoko Ono. Just unlistenable. I was like, wow, I can't even get through the first track.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Should we see if we can power on?
Let's go.
Small town girl, damn happy 'cause I got my little nappy and some opium just let it stray. Just a small town girl that wants to give it a whirl, while my lips still hold me straight.
Okay, so we were right. So you need to. I don't know that you would have understood. Did you understand a word of that, Greg? Just hearing it?
Not really.
Okay. So I don't know if you're reading along like I am, but we talk about this. The cook got drunk, and all the whores they shrunk onto the size of dessert plates. But me, I'm happy because I got my little nappy and some opium to set me straight. She's a small town girl. I'm a small town girl who wants to give it a whirl while my looks still hold me straight. Straight up to illusion and fantasy's fusion of reality mixed with drink. So I think we were kind of spot on with where we were kind of analyzing this earlier, where we landed.
Yeah.
God.
And I think, those are themes that Lou Reed, I think, that are not foreign to him. And he was very much in this, a drug culture of the 60s in New York and in Greenwich Village and all of that scene and the music and the art scene and the Andy Warhol factory scene and psychedelics were all of that stuff happening. And so this is something, that is a theme that makes sense with that Lou would be talking about, and but also does comport with Frank Whittekind and the Lulu character and all that was going on with her. And in that scene, which is kind of interesting, that maybe one of the things Lou was attracted to was that the art scene and some of the scene in Berlin in that time period was very relatable to him to New York City in the 60s. There's a lot of similar things that he could connect with. Well, one thing I wanted to bring up, Chaz, musically that I felt in this last minute or so, 30 seconds that you just played, is I got a little bit of, because we're talking about some of these musicians and mashups and backing bands, and we talked about Bob Dylan and how he was backed by the band for some when he started playing in a more electric style and moving away from his acoustic folk roots. What I heard, the connection I made was Neil Young and Crazy Horse. I don't know if you are familiar with that, but Crazy Horse was also a very heavy rock sound band. They're not a heavy metal band, but they're sort of a heavy rock band that had very loud drums, very distorted guitars, very thrashing beat. And Neil, who also had that side of him, not exactly like Dylan, but was an acoustic player, has some folk roots as well, and then of course very famous for playing with Crosby, Stills and Nash, and that sort of acoustic rock sound. Crazy Horse, and Neil was known for also, probably like Lou, he's an artist and he experimented with a lot of different sounds, a lot of different styles. One of them, though, that he played with for quite a while was that band Crazy Horse.
Yeah.
And if you listen, I don't know if you can hear it too.
Is that where we got Rockin' in the Free World, or was that Neil on his own?
No, that was a little different, but I don't think that was with Crazy Horse. But if maybe we can cue up some Crazy Horse at some point to listen to Neil singing with that band. Because I think there's a parallel to it musically that if we back this track up 30 seconds and listen to that and see if you can hear, Neil Young over Crazy Horse a little bit in what we're hearing with Lou singing, being backed by Metallica.
Yeah, to me, this is like slam poetry, being thrown in over, at that point, what was the world's biggest metal band, and world's biggest metal band just repeating one riff over and over. I think that was one of the things that really bothered me about this too, was that the song didn't go anywhere sonically with Metallica. It was the same riff over and over again, even with the the harmonizing that's going on. That's just being repeated. It's like they just looped it.
But I think it does get, though, to that point that we were talking about, which is there's no question that Lou is demanding a lot of the listener here.
Yes.
But he's when you're reading these lyrics out and stopping the track and reading these lyrics, he's also giving a lot. I mean, clearly there's a lot going on lyrically in Lou's mind, and because we know that there's a connection to Frank Whitakin's plays, this is not a superficial album. This is not a guy just repeating a lyric and having nothing else behind it, right? This is not a superficial track. In my mind, whether it's effective, whether it is compelling, those are other questions. But it's clearly demanding of the listener. This is
very demanding prologue.
Not an easy listen. He's not, just we're not having a great time. This is not a party track that we're going to, sit around with some friends. And,
this isn't Van Halen, baby.
Does anybody want to dance?
Right.
I'm going to flip on some Lulu. But as a piece of art, and I think that's where Bowie was going, that this is a profound piece of work. And obviously we know that there's a lot of art out there that is very demanding of the listener or the viewer. When you look at modern art and you say, I don't get it. This looks like this guy, Jackson Pollock, looks like he just threw some paint against the wall. What's the big deal here?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Wolfie. I'm just seeing this as a very demanding prologue to what is to come. This setup is giving us, like you said, a lot of meat, and I'm just kind of bringing it back to the prologue of the play itself, right? So, the setup is you have his animal tamer. He's on stage. He's got Lulu, been brought out in a cage. He's been tickling under Lulu's chin. He's talking about her, in a way that is, she's described as someone who is, designed by nature to lure, seduce, poison, yea, murder in a manner no man knows. My pretty beast, right? To be unaffected and not pierced, out with distorted artificial folly, even if the critics praise thee fort less holy. Just hearing that whole, what he's describing there. Same thing I'm hearing from Lou here. He's setting this girl up. We're getting to know her. She's a small town girl coming to Berlin with big ideas at this point. I'm seeing a little more innocence in Lou's character, frankly, right now, than what we were kind of being told Lulu was all about. I don't know if you're seeing it that same way, but
at the beginning, and to be fair, you and I just did a fairly quick reading of the Lulu plays. We have not seen, I have not certainly seen what it looks like performed, which would probably give us a lot more sense of the play, or if we'd seen even more than one staging of that play, what different directors thought about this.
Yeah, different interpretations.
Perfect. Yeah, how they interpreted it.
Well, that's something we can do over the course of our podcast, Greg. As we kind of get into this, we can do some research in between episodes, come back with some found content without going forward, and see what we can draw.
But I do, I guess my reading of it from the text, from Wittekind's text, is that, Lulu's discovering herself a bit as the plays move forward, and as she grows and has these different experiences, she's trying to understand the world and herself, I think, and she is going from being a very young woman to having had a lot of different experiences and looking at the world differently. Certainly, as the second part, reaches the end, that's a very different Lulu, I think, than
much different
than the girl we met at the very beginning. So
right, and you've got this setup, right? So to go back to the play, thou hast no right to spoil the shape most fitting, most true of women with meows and spitting, and mind all foolery and making faces, the childish simpleness of vice disgraces. So it's that idea that there's some innocence here. So I take it back. There is some innocence kind of being conveyed in the Lulu character as we start out. Right. And basically at the end of that prologue, what does he say? He turns it over, to this beast. And the beast, as it turns out, is, the public, the honored public, right? That has just walked into this scene. And, it's kind of for you to judge where this all goes. All right, let's jump back into the music because we got about a minute left, a little less than a minute.
Fantasy's fusion of reality mixed with dreams. I'm just a small town girl who's gonna give life a whirl. Looking at the Brandenburg Gate, I'm just a small town girl giving life a whirl. Looking at the Brandenburg Gate, I'm just a small town girl. Small town girl. Small town girl. I'm just a small town girl. Small town girl.
All right. Well, that was Brandenburg Gate. So, okay, this is going to hurt my brain because now we know Lou is the voice of Lulu. So this is what we're hearing. Oh, my God, he's the small town girl. Yeah, when I first heard this, come on, we're coming off of, monster success. I mean, Enter Sandman, wherever I may roam, Master of Puppets, Ride the Lightning, Whiplash. I mean, the legacy that was Metallica. Hearing James Hetfield relegated to this background, Supremes kind of role, it just is not working for me. And even in Lou Reed's very avant rock kind of world, that hurt my brain when I first heard it. Yeah, this was not a great.
You were not in a place you were not in a frame of mind to listen to this piece of music and this piece of art. I don't think.
Good Lord, no.
But with some years under the tires now, right? Some miles.
And some distance from all the, chemically induced nights of listening to, hard, heavy music.
Some more perspective on life as a person and a father now for many years.
Father of a daughter, right? So kind of trying to understand
your perspective, right? Having listened to that much more music, played that much more music as a musician yourself.
Yeah.
I think we both are in a place where we can listen to this in a different way than we would have 10 or 20 years ago, for sure.
Well, we can, but I can't
Certainly,
see it getting to a different
certainly
outcome.
40 years ago. What year did it come out?
Yeah, 2011. So
Okay, so it's not that old.
it's not. It's
But I
not.
couldn't have listened to this 30 years ago. I don't think my head would have been in the right frame of mind.
No, certainly not. No, certainly if I, no, the kid coming out of high school who was, the big fan. So if like Metallica had done this, like say, after their seminal release, And Justice for All, which for me, quite frankly, was a departure in their sound musically, and I had already started like, whoa, where's this band going from what I know and love as, the tape trading kid? Very commercial, very overproduced. To if I had tried to consume this then, I mean, I wouldn't have gotten past Lou Reed's acoustic guitar before I threw the thing out. So yeah, I can be a little more objective now. I can appreciate that they're coming from a very complex work. It was complex for its time. It's still complex to these days, as we described, right? I think it'll be interesting to see as we go down this path, Greg, on this journey to see who has produced this. What are those interpretations like? Is it any more or less challenging society, in terms of a societal lens today as it was back in when it was originally produced? And then, two, there are a few theatrical releases that were in the 20s and I think the 40s. So I'm going to kind of check that source material out too as we kind of go along, and just to see what were the movies like relative to if we can find any productions of the play itself. But yeah, first impression though, still I'm kind of like, wow, especially that third verse where Lou just really does sound like a drunken whore. I mean, I just like, what is going on with that? I'm not there. I wish I could say I've immediately dropped the bias and I'm looking at this more like Mr. Bowie, but it's going to be some work, man. There's going to be some work on this because it's brought back a lot of memories.
So for me,
being new to this, Greg, yeah. How does this really? I mean, how does it hit you as a Lou Reed fan? How's it hitting you?
Lou Reed fan, but also and not as a Metallica fan in any significant way, being aware of their music, but not.
Well, yeah. Let's time out there. So give us some of the Metallica songs you're familiar with.
I don't think I can actually give you any off the top of my head.
Enter
if you name
Sandman?
Some, which one? Sandman.
Enter Sandman.
Yeah, I'm sure I know that one.
Won't say a word, right? So everyone knows that one.
Yep.
Are you a fan of the Netflix show Stranger Things? They've gotten a lot of press recently, right? So Eddie Munson, the main character, one of the main characters in that show, right? He uses the song "Master of Puppets" to hold off number one, right?
Okay.
So kind of in the finale of last season.
Yeah, I've definitely heard the music. I've seen some of the video of them performing, and but I haven't spent time with it and
right.
Really
so you're really
digested it.
Cold.
So it's very background to me, sort of peripheral music. But certainly, listen to probably I've listened in terms of like sort of what I think of as heavy metal. What I've probably heard the most of is AC/DC, I would say.
Okay. So yeah, not really going to be in genre at all. So maybe.
And I'm a fan. I would consider myself a fan of that and what they do. I like their music.
More hard rock. More hard rock than I would say classic heavy metal, and certainly in the vein of Metallica. So I think maybe one of the outcomes of our little exploration here is I can clue you into what is the genius of Metallica in their genre, right? As Lou Reed is genius and granddaddy in avant rock. Maybe help you appreciate more where Metallica comes into play and their greatness.
I think that's a good point. Like so, and I've definitely listened to you had mentioned Guns N' Roses, and I've definitely listened to that music more than Metallica, and I guess that also falls more into a heavy rock than a metal genre.
Yeah, exactly, and so Metallica, right? I think at the end of the day, what you're hearing in this, not what Metallica's known for. No, not at all. Other than the tone. So the
Yeah.
tone is very representative of where they were at the time with their commercial sound, but beyond that, no. The speed and the precision and and certainly the lyrical content and just where James is in the mix. He's always out front. He's got a very big, commanding voice.
And he's relegated to this backup singer role, huh?
Well, and now we're hearing Lou saying he's the small town girl, so now I can't help in my mind but hearing James say the same damn thing.
Yeah, well, and it's a gender, but Lou has always been one for bending genders. So
take a walk on the wild side, baby. You're not going to see those themes in Metallica music as well. So, right, going back to the first quote that we talked about from Lou Reed, that this was an obvious collaboration. No, I'm sorry, not at all. Not at all. Okay, so Greg, at the end of the first track, first listen,
yes.
Are we thinking, yeah, we're like, let's judge the track on its own. Thumbs up, thumbs down. And we got to come up with a more creative way to judge this. And I think I'll find some sound bites as we go along, and this will evolve over time. But let's give a quick pass. Are you giving it a thumbs up or a thumbs down?
Well, I don't know if I want to, use that scale, but I'll give you my reaction to the
All right, give us your scale.
I think it's unfair, based on what we've talked about, to judge the track based on one listen.
Okay.
I think it's unfair. I can't give you a fair assessment of it because it is too demanding, in my opinion, to judge it that superficially.
Okay.
And it would be like saying, read the first couple pages of Dante's Inferno and tell me if it's a good poem. Like I really cannot. A funny story. I did take a class on the Divine Comedy in college, and I had a professor who taught that class, and he said that when he was a student, maybe a grad student, he took a class with a professor, and they started the class by reading just the first page of Dante's Inferno, and they spent the entire semester on the first page of Dante's Inferno, and at the end of the class, the professor apologized for giving it such a cursory judgment, so that.
Okay, well, I don't know
that always stuck
to work.
That always stuck with me, and I'm not necessarily comparing this work to Dante. Maybe it deserves that comparison, maybe not. I don't think we're in a position to judge that yet, but hopefully as we continue down this path, we will be in more of a position. But what I would say is that from what I heard on that track, I am intrigued by what Lou is doing. And I think that there's something here that certainly makes me want to listen further and understand what he's up to here and what he is putting forth in this 10-track album. And so I'll also say, Chaz, that when it started, I would say the first couple of minutes, halfway through, I already mentioned that musically it was not working for me. I didn't feel that Lou's vocals on those background tracks were doing anything for me. But then as we got maybe 2/3 of the way, I started to hear Neil Young with Crazy Horse, which we'll have to do a little listen to and see if that comparison holds up for you. Which I do think Neil Young is very effective with Crazy Horse, even though he also has primarily a different rock and folk acoustic rock genre that he's associated with. But he's known for both, I think, with heavy music and acoustic music, Neil. And then by the end, that last part where I know you were laughing and getting a chuckle out of what they were doing, but I thought that the last 30 seconds musically was the best, most effective Lou's vocal on top of what Metallica was doing.
Okay.
And if I can bring in another example, I started to hear a little bit in that last 30 seconds of Axl Rose singing the Bob Dylan song Knocking on Heaven's Door with a hugely heavy rock Guns N' Roses band behind him. And as you know, Knocking on Heaven's Door, the Bob Dylan track, is a much, Dylan is more of an acoustic player originally, and is a very different genre than what Guns N' Roses does. But I like that track, and I like what Guns N' Roses and Axl does when singing that Dylan song, and I was hearing a little bit of that, really strong groove, that really strong guitar and drum sound that Metallica was putting down on that last 30 seconds, and hearing Lou's vocal sort of come into its strongest, I thought its strongest sound of the whole song, which is about a 4.5 minute song. I thought that last 30 seconds, to me, just musically, there's a lot of words and lyrics and all of that going on here, but just musically, that I thought, not that I thought it was a really powerful musical track, because I think it is problematic, and there's a lot of things that are not very compelling about it musically. But I thought, that it got better. I think it got, for me, and also because
better,
of the fact that and the way we listened to it in pieces, right? Yeah. I had time to digest it a little bit, because we talked about, as we talked about the track going through it in pieces, I could absorb it a little bit and digest it. And then and it was almost like I was listening again when we would start back up, and with fresh ears, but having a little bit of background in my head as to what it is that I'm listening to, and how do I listen to it, and how do I judge it. And so I felt like by the last 30 seconds, I was in a position to listen to it and judge it more for what Lou was trying to communicate. And I think I was getting it a little more. It's a very difficult track, and certainly not very accessible musically or lyrically. But I think by the end, I started to get a little bit on the same page with where Lou was trying to bring us.
All right, and I'm going to give that to you, Greg. I'm the same place, Wolfie, as we're doing this stop, start, and we're gathering some context, and we're kind of unpacking it and talking about it as we're going through it. I think I can appreciate it a little more, certainly, than even where I was in 2011 when I first heard it, right? So I can say, okay, there is an effort going on here, as we've described. It's a very complex work. This is going to be a challenge to get through if we really want to understand what the artist was trying to do. And I'm kind of putting it now in very neutral terms. The artist. It's not Lou. It's not Metallica. This is one work. It's collaboration. Let's just call it, Lou-talica. This is Lou-talica kind of coming at this. This is the artist we're talking about. This is the work. It's going to be a challenge. But I got to say, even with that and giving that ground, I am not there where you are. Clearly, you're coming at this from a much more intellectual place. And that's why I think this is going to be a great exploration for us, because it's really going to challenge me to put aside my bias, to put aside my very natural metalhead slant, and just be able to, adjudicate this in a pass-fail type of situation. No, there's going to be lots of shade of gray. This isn't a black album. This isn't, this isn't anything like even listening to one of the records with the Andy Warhol bananas on the sleeves.
Velvet Underground, right?
Velvet Underground. This is not going to be, Sweet Jane, where you can kind of take and understand and identify because you've seen these people and you understand it. This is something really just different. I have to kind of approach it with giving that space to allow this to develop, as you said, as a body of work earlier, right? So even to try and judge the tracks in a standalone type of fashion, probably never intended that, in any regard, right? There's not a single on the album, I would imagine, right? No. Not one single.
I think we definitely have to listen to the whole thing before we really can render an opinion on it.
I think you're right. Yeah. So it's not going to be like some of my favorite podcasts on the Deep Dive Podcast Network. It's not going to be a pass fail, or that's what dreams are made of at this point. But where I think we are is in a place of first impressions. So what I heard you describe was intrigue, and I want to hear more. I don't know that I would agree necessarily that for me it got better as it went on. I think it actually fell apart as it went on. And toward the end there came this then out of nowhere melodic guitar part coming out of the end of that song where I just didn't understand where was that underneath the whole thing the whole time and we weren't hearing it or where did that come from? How does it fit? So like even in the world of like understanding Metallica music means somebody who, pick up my guitar in the back over here and start playing some of the stuff I know now. This is really not familiar territory for me. Like as a guitar player, as a fan of the band, other than hearing James's voice, if James wasn't singing the background vocal, I would have still identified that as Metallica. There's no doubt. Like they had tried to do it anonymously with them, no vocals involved, but just the band in the background, just being truly Lou Reed's background band. They would have been identified, I think pretty early. So, that much we know. But yeah, God, this track coming in at 421. I mean, if you're a fan of this thing standalone, I would say you're at that 420 mark and you're high as a kite because I'm just not feeling it right now. But you know what? I'll be with you on this journey of being intrigued and wanting to know more. And I think that's kind of where we can leave it for this week. We got a whole lot more to unpack. I do think that at this point we want to let people know how to find us out in social media. So I gotta say that these days I am more just kind of disgusted with what I see in social media on Twitter, and I don't have Instagram on my phone anymore. The TikTok thing, I do hope they ban it. It's just a waste of time. And even with Facebook, I mean, like the reels and all the other stuff. So I am on Facebook. If people want to come along on the journey with us, we'll probably spin up a page that is regarding Lulu. And so you'll probably find us on Twitter at regarding Lulu. You can probably find us on Facebook at regarding Lulu. But myself, you can find Chaz Charles on Facebook. I'd be happy to accept a friend request. And Greg, how about you? Is there any way people who are listening can connect with you offline and get to know a little more about you, or do you want to keep it silent until we get further into this?
Well, if I can, we could just mention a little bit about our musical backgrounds and.
Oh, let's do that. I totally forgot. Absolutely.
Yeah. So maybe I
accidentally forgot to. It was an accidental breakdown in my mind that I forgot to allow you that opportunity. So please, sir.
Thank you for that reference. Yes. So I do have a band called Accidental Breakdown, and you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/accidental breakdown, and that'll give you a little bit of a connection and to me and to what I'm doing, and be happy to have you follow that page if you feel like it, and maybe listen to some recordings or videos over there of what we're doing with the band. But I'm playing bass guitar and singing for the most part with the Accidental Breakdown band. And what are you up to musically these days, Chaz?
Yeah, man. So let's talk about your genre too. You're more of a reggae type of artist out there with the Accidental Breakdown, are you not?
True. I mean, it's not a reggae band, but we do probably play more reggae and more reggae-inspired music than anything else. Although we do play a lot of other stuff. And one of the guys, the saxophone.
You play any Def Leppard? You ever been Def Leppard?
You know what? I don't think we have.
So
we've played some of the artists that we've talked about on this podcast, namely Bob Dylan. We play some Bob Dylan songs. So
gotcha.
And actually, you'll be impressed. We play a Guns N' Roses song.
All right. Well, I really liked where you went with the whole. You kind of drew me in with the whole Guns N' Roses doing "Knocking on Heaven's Door." Yeah. I was feeling that. I was definitely feeling that.
I love that stuff. And I kind of got inspired. I mentioned that I listened to Guns N' Roses and I like their music. And I guess their biggest hit, "Sweet Child of Mine." So I had heard Sheryl Crow do her version of that song, which I liked. And I had seen Sheryl Crow live this past summer, and she's a great performer. And so I started learning that song on acoustic guitar and had fun singing that acoustically, and then brought it to the band, and we do it just more of just as a straight rock tune. We don't do it in a hard rock way that Guns N' Roses puts into it. Just really stick to more of almost like a Tom Petty, if you think about Last Dance with Mary Jane, like a Last Dance with Mary Jane kind of a sound of it, that kind of a guitar, like just a hard rock, a little distorted guitar in there, but very classic sound. And it's a great, beautiful song. It's such a beautiful song lyrically that they wrote, that it stands up. I think it can be played acoustically. It can be played as a rock song. They play it. He's
got eyes of the bluest skies, right?
It's very, very poetic, very emotional, tender song.
Yeah.
So I people love that song. And so when we play that out, it's been getting a great reaction from people.
Awesome.
So we do a little bit of the Guns N' Roses, no Metallica, no Def Leppard, but a little bit of the Guns N' Roses. And certainly the Dylan, a few of the Dylan songs. And as you said, we do some of the Marley songs, both Ziggy and Bob. We do a little Ziggy, a little Bob, and I
believe you do some Radiators and some other Zigzag Ghostland. Some
back in the day.
Oh yeah, man.
Some blues, some blues music. We have some jazzers in the band, so we do a little bit of jazz music, a little Herbie Hancock.
Yeah, you guys are very talented. Yes.
So it's a lot of fun. So
anyway, so people should check you out. Facebook.com Accidental Breakdown. Yeah, man.
And what are you up to with you've been playing guitar?
I have,
out in Colorado.
I have out here in northern Colorado. I'm in a band called Steel Revenge, and that is very much as it sounds. We're 80s hair metal, and so we're not goth or gore or death metal or any of that. We're not even thrash or speed metal, so we're not playing any Metallica either. Although we've talked about adding some of their choicer songs to our set list, but no, we're very much in the vein of Def Leppard, Van Halen, Dokken. I don't know that we've got any Guns N' Roses coming up anytime soon, but, certainly not out of genre. You mentioned AC/DC. We just played a treatment of an LA Guns song where we kind of psyched the audience out like Tracy Guns himself, who's the main guitarist and was one of the founders, in fact, of band you talked about, Guns N' Roses. He's the gun in the Guns N' Roses from very early on. Hollywood Rose became Guns N' Roses. Axl Rose, Tracy parted ways, but we played a little Hell's Bells, and kind of the intro there is very much what Tracy Guns was inspired by for a song called Never Enough. So we play a lot of the LA hair metal scene mixed in with some of the new wave of British heavy metal guys, as we discussed. Def Leppard again. I can't say Def Leppard enough. They're my favorite band. But we're playing out here and gigging in northern Colorado. And so you can find us on Facebook, Facebook.com Steel Revenge. So check that page out as well. And with that, Greg, we will wrap it up for this week. Get production done. Get our songs, or get our
podcast cut and mastered and posted, and get ready to come back with track 2
of You. Off Up Lulu by Metallica. Lou Reed and Metallica. So everybody, thanks for joining us, and have a great week.